All right, Simon, thank you. And really, it's just a great pleasure to be in front of this audience at this time. When we talked about platforms a decade or two ago, we had to be very careful to distinguish between the engineering systems. So for example, a platform in the 80s or 90s was a car. You know, you built your Honda Coupe, and you got a Civic, and you got a CR-V, and all of the guts of the thing were the same, and you filled out sort of a product market. That's not what we're talking about. There are elements of these reusable technologies that I think are very important, but then laying on top of that, the network effects that I think Annabelle did such a good job of explaining is really important and has some pretty big implications for firm strategy. Okay, so here's a shoe. We know about product technology and services, and I think what's interesting is the degree to which even something as simple as a shoe becomes sort of a biometric sensing device. And now all of a sudden, all aspects of our lives are becoming kind of connected and instrumented and are becoming I/O points. And all of a sudden, you take a firm like Under Armour or Nike, and they may as well start to look like some of the medical firms. So now all of a sudden, the electronic medical records firms and the Epics and the Aetnas and the insurance companies starting to want to connect to and gain access to streams of data that come off, again, something as simple as a shoe. So let's go back, though, and kind of think when we learned strategy. You know, we talk about, well, how do you get stuff done? Well, you go find some stuff, and I'm from the Gulf South, and we like to poke holes out in the Gulf of Mexico and suck out hydrocarbons. I think you do that in the North Sea with BP. So you get some raw materials, and then you start to do sub-assemblies. You know, we'll do a little production, then we assemble these things, and then we send them off to a customer, and hooray, they gave us money. And then we give all the money back up the chain. That's kind of how we're used to thinking about doing business and making stuff. So we optimize these systems. And that's a lot of what our management sort of measurement systems, a lot of our accounting systems, a lot of finance, a lot of human resources are all designed to make this kind of flow very efficient. Now we're doing things that are very different. And so this is a slide, I've done some work with Thomson Reuters, which has been a traditional kind of SAP style, I'm going to back a pile of servers into your company and sell you a whole bunch of software, and then I'll customize it, and I'll have a huge army of consultants who will then help you do exactly what you need to do at wonderful prices, making great livings for all involved. That's not going to happen forever. And in fact, what we're starting to see is even in those systems, now we're looking at much more shared infrastructure and a much looser kind of connection between the producer side and the core firm. And instead of controlling all of the resources in this value chain going from left to right, we're sort of allowing you to affiliate. And we will provide you tools and infrastructure that will then make you efficient in your production. And we'll set up systems that do the matching and do the search so that you can find valuable business partners. But we're not going to own all of that asset. We're not going to own all of the value creation. We're moving into this facilitation role. And so that's a really big change in the way you think about kind of organizing a firm, organizing the creation of value, and going to market. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on network effects, but one of the things that's really important in these systems, and what's different from kind of standard linear value chains, is these systems are more valuable when more people adopt the same technology and the same standards, or you may simply prefer that those people be available to get access to. So there are lots of reasons why the systems would increase in value. So another slide that I think is worth noting is we've got some data that's coming out of the accounting world that actually supports this notion that network effects in particular and intangibles sort of in the large are becoming greater and greater fractions of kind of the capitalization of any major firm. And for the regulatory community, and I'm staring at you, Eric, I'd say we're probably far behind in kind of understanding what the implication is of market caps sort of switching from basic things we can count and touch and feel over to sort of this dark matter of, what is this stuff? Okay, so a couple of shifts that we observe. Sort of one from resource control to resource orchestration. Two, from internal optimization to encouraging external interactions. And then three, from kind of a focus on that end customer value, where you want to make sure that they're getting what they need so that you can sell it and then kind of move all the money back up the chain, hopefully having a good fraction of it land in your accounts, to this broader ecosystem value, sort of making sure that if you're central in that system, you then benefit to the extent that other parties in the system also benefit. So the goal then becomes away from control, entry barriers, and differentiation toward creating and facilitating kind of market exchanges. So that's a good point at which to just stop and think, well, what did we learn? Many of you have probably been through some sort of an MBA program, and Michael Porter kind of did a nice job of synthesizing what does it mean to manage a linear value chain system. Sort of how do we think about doing that? Well, let's see. We've got suppliers, and we've got buyers, and then we've got the possibility of entrants, and of course substitutes. And entrants and substitutes to some degree are somewhat overlapped. If you look at all of these, and then of course the rivalry among the existing folks. So if you look at all of those forces operating, they're all negative. So every one of these is something to be sort of held off. All of that starts to shift in a platform sense, because now all of a sudden, well, the suppliers, as I showed you in that kind of triangular arrangement, are really selling through you. So you're no longer directly competing with them so much as you're trying to facilitate and then benefit and tax their transactions. So now all of a sudden, you want to encourage more. You're not holding them off, but you're saying, how can I make you successful? Because if you are, then I am. Similarly, on the buyer side, I'm not really negotiating with them so much anymore, as I would just like more of you here, because to the extent that that's true, I'll have more on the supply side. So it's a different kind of view. And so if you look at all of the functions that we're kind of used to thinking about how to manage in a firm, they all start to kind of subtly shift in important ways. So in finance, Roger was just telling us that Surrey has this kind of open ledger and blockchain kind of study. That's really important, because what that says is that now things are going to be publicly auditable, and to the extent that more people are adopting that standard, now we're going to start to have sort of more trust and verification, and they'll have to have some way of getting compensated for doing the computation on the blockchain and the verification of transactions. So now all of a sudden it starts to shift to more of a community view. Even something as basic as accounting and finance. That's a big shift and a different way of kind of thinking through these things. In human resources, and again, Peter has done a lot of work in kind of helping us think through this. Now all of a sudden, we're seeing more of an acceleration of really what's core to a firm versus what can we simply leverage external communities to do. R&D. So R&D used to be the province of sort of very specialized departments, and in some types of technologies, that's likely to be true. But now all of a sudden we're seeing just massive experimentation with open innovation, design tournaments, and contests. In marketing, now we're seeing a complete shift from kind of taking a packaged message and then pushing it out and hoping somebody pays attention to setting up a system, using a lot of social, and having people come and do more inbound marketing. So a big shift. In strategy, we're talking about entry barriers, inimitable resources, hold everyone off because that's bad news, to much more sort of think about the ecosystem. On IT, you move from sort of thinking about how much can I control and keep secret to facilitating interactions among end users. And then finally, and I think Peter and Annabelle did a really nice job, on the operations and logistics side, now all of a sudden we've got the rise of these asset-light firms that are coordinating the capacity of other parties as opposed to having to acquire it and utilize it themselves. This is actually the last chapter of our book, and I took some time and I said, well, what does it mean for some of the different industries? And just sort of highlight a couple of points. These services, higher ed, finance, healthcare, because I was asked, actually by Norton, can you take that chapter and put it into a page? And better yet, with very few words. I said, okay, I'll give that a go. And if we think about industries and the likely impact on them, how information intensive they are has a big impact on whether you're going to be subjected to disruption. So that's why we saw the news media, music, television, all being fairly early in terms of the way they got impacted by the rise of these kind of platform systems. And then if you go all the way over to something like energy, where aside from coordinating the end distributed energy resources like solar cells and maybe some of these Tesla battery types of things, for the most part you're dealing with really asset heavy systems, and so they're going to be some of the last that are likely to face disruption. But I would say for every single industry, one of the things they would want to know is along what dimensions are they likely to face this kind of disruption and competition, and then what are they doing about it? Platform disruption tends to go like a laser beam at these things with protected margins and then disrupt them. Similarly, fragmentation. If it's fragmented, it's easier to roll up, and so you'll see a lot of these kind of aggregation systems rolling up, so Yahoo and eBay and others. If information asymmetry is high, that's a place where platforms can provide better data. So I guess what I would close with is if you think about critical capabilities for firms as a result of this sort of dramatic shift, it's not just supply chain optimization. So we know that from Porter, and we know how to think about that. But if that's all you do, that's probably a trap. Because then you're missing, well, what does the ecosystem coordination function look like? What is your strategy around that? And we could spend an hour. Probably one of the most critical functions that firms need to invest in is effective governance mechanisms around maintaining the health of their ecosystem. So what are the measurements for that? And then how do you absolutely promise to be kind of a neutral or trusted party so you don't take too much of the value that's generated? That's part of governance. And what do you do to control the negative network effects of bad actors on your system? And so you need to have ways of detecting them and then excluding them. Now, the problem that poses for the regulatory community is that governance that does exclusion of participants starts to look an awful lot like abuse of power. And so one of the tests that you then need to put into place is that governance operating for the health of the ecosystem and the health of the community, or is it being used to advantage the core firm? And so that's sort of one of the tests, and I think this is sort of one of the areas in the regulatory community that we're not all the way there, but this is a conversation that I'm looking forward to participating in. And with that, I'd just like to thank everyone for the chance to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.